Hello, in this video I want to examine, I'm going to talk about the measurements and modern cities and how they connect to esoteric groups with a focus on Freemasons, they being the most well known and probably largest, their symbols being so important. But I want to start by asking some questions about ancient stonemasons and how their craft has moved on to become as what is now called the craft. In South America, or especially Central America, but most well known Egypt, in many other, well, across the ancient world, the stonemason was key in creating and building the temple. The typical image is that they just gave some chisel to some farm worker and said, off you go and go make your things. But if you look, if you study this for even a short time, you're going to find some incredible work done with incredible precision that even modern engineers with all their best tools would be jealous to achieve not only the beauty but the level of perfection. And I want to sort of ask, well, what were the ancient origins of these masons, and how did this stone masonry move through time, and what is the impact of the symbolism in the modern world? Egypt being key, but Egypt and the Indus, these other civilizations, predate what's known as the ancient Dark Age. So roughly around the year 1350, which coincides with Akhenaten, there was a Dark Age where across the world trade and temple building stopped and then re-emerged. But one of the last places in this Dark Age was the Temple of Atreus. So Mycenae, think about the Hittites and the Hittite Empire. The Temple of Atreus, we see the beehive-shaped cone, the beehive being one of those dominant symbols that still carries on today. Esoteric groups, Oddfellows, Freemason tracing boards, the beehive, and that symbol's still very important. I've been talking about numbers a lot, the number 33, for instance, being one of the main symbolic numbers, but also very profound in other ways. But the Treasury of Atreus, there's 33 levels of masonry in the hive, the dome, and it's also 48 feet wide. Now we come to, so then we had the ancient Dark Age, and then the you can say the ancient Enlightenment or the Resurgence began, and one of the more famous, especially with the ancient Greeks, and one of the most famous buildings for that time, the Parthenon, also was 48 feet high, same as the width of the Treasury of Atreus. This is a harmonic number with all the beautiful astronomical geometric numbers hiding underneath. So who were these masons? It's been lost in time, but I want to sort of examine a little bit more, and especially through the Greek, and really look closely at the Roman period, and start sort of looking at the masons of the Roman temples and the iconic Roman buildings. And the Colosseum in Rome has to rank in the top 10 of especially in the Roman period, but of the ancient world. And hidden in the Colosseum, there's a series of lovely, beautiful connections, not only to number but to the craft of masonry, and also to some mathematical mysteries. Not so much a mystery, but beautiful mathematics that are also I've touched on in previous episodes, especially regarding 108, the Vesica Pisces, set squares, square root of 3, and some other beautiful symbolism, construction, and levels of knowledge, and how these all sorts of tie together, and how, especially through the Colosseum, we will find so much of what I've been discussing especially in the Americas and in Australia, and the Freemasonic connections to certain buildings, and how those buildings will always contain certain numbers and measurements, certain proportions, and certain architectural features as well. So it's both the aesthetics and the maths and the geometry, and also the actual art of stonemasonry itself. Once upon a time, only masons could become masons, but then we have the masonry. Now we have free and accepted masons. So basically, anyone from any background can become a mason or a freemason. It's not strictly for people involved in the secret craft. Of all the craft guilds were very keen on protecting their knowledge and their set. So we had carpentry, tilers. All these people were very they had their knowledge, and they were very keen on protecting it and protecting the quality of it, a bit like a trade union. Now the craft guilds in ancient times did pretty much the same thing. So what's happening with the Colosseum? One of the numbers I've been, especially recently, been talking about, and how it's connected to modern architecture, and especially to weights and measures, and also to the esoteric groups, is a number 528. I've mentioned earlier Elijah Myers is one of the more prolific architects in the last 1.5 centuries, and a big impact on America. He designed 3 of the state capitals, 180-foot dome, and there's a marker stone on the steps indicating it's 5,280 feet above sea level. More than just the obvious. 528 Palm, the Oddfellows building in Melbourne, the High Court in Canberra, and also the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge, the main architect being John Bradfield and him being a Mason. In recent times, in Brasilia, the Brasilia Cathedral by Oscar Niemeyer, 528 palms again. 528 is a key point for conversions between weights and measures, and this one of the main reasons that it's important. There's a lot of other stuff. The Lincoln Memorial, the columns of 44 feet are 528 inches, Doric columns. It's 33 yards high, and the combined height of the columns 528 yards, which is a conversion point for 990 Doric cubits, 6,600 Ionic palm. Ionic and Doric are key symbols in Freemasonry, but they also have meanings going back. For instance, writings of Vitruvius talk about the origins and the perfect proportions and the meanings of these columns. Doric representing male, strength, seeing; Ionic representing woman, wisdom and feeling. Doric, Ionic and Corinthian are the classical Greek orders of architecture, and they also connect to other meanings. For Doric, man; Ionic, woman; and Corinthian, the virgin. Strength, wisdom and beauty; seeing, feeling and the sense of smell. So there's quite a few levels to this, and also they also represent systems of measurement. But back to the Colosseum. The central arena, or the arena itself is 272 feet long. The central arena is 180 feet wide. Now we go back to Elijah Myers and the Colorado State Capitol building. It is 180 foot high to the dome, and it is 272 feet high. These measurements you'll find repeated in many structures, state capitals, grand public buildings, but also the 5,280 feet. Going back to the ancient world and to the beginning of, very close to the beginning of officially recognised civilization, Mohenjo-Daro, 108 feet being one of these constants, but the Great Bath is also 180 feet long. The Grand Mosque in Samarra, 108 feet wide at the base, 180 feet high. It was built to be an observatory, and the mosque was the way that the architect got it built was to make it a mosque, but the real purpose by the architect, and if you read a bit into that history, it was to be astronomical observatory. Capitol building in Washington. Well, it's depending on which one you choose. It's either, but I think it's 180 feet to the dome, also 180 feet and 3 inches. The mouldings will give you the difference in these measures, and both of them are very important. But back to the Colosseum, the central arena. 272 feet long, 157 feet wide. Basically, it works out to be 265 over 153, or the square root of 3. The set squares that you're probably familiar with, the 30, 60, 90, that also has that 265, 153 proportion, but it's also 108,000 seconds, being the 30 degrees. For instance, that's the speed of the Earth in kilometres around the Sun per hour, 108,000 kilometres the polar diameter of Saturn. Also, the Colosseum is one of the earliest, at least that I've found, there might be earlier, but the earliest that I've found, where we see the Doric, Ionic and Corinthian columns built in levels and structured in this order. On the left-hand side, we see one Freemasonic tracing board. There's a Doric, Corinthian and Ionic. Again, multiple levels of meaning, but for instance, the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney, very strong Freemasonic origins. It's well known. It's part of open history, but also Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns. So, esoteric groups and the mysteries. So it's Oddfellows, Foresters, Druids, and these other organisations. 1868, Prince Alfred, son of Queen Victoria, visits Australia, and on first arriving in Brisbane, there was a procession, and the Masons, Oddfellows, Druids and Foresters were in the lead of this procession. They also built these triumphal arches, some of stone, triumphal arch of wheat, for instance. So we have stone, we have coal, we also have a triumphal arch of light. And so I think that each one of them were representing not only the local elements, but also the 4 elements. While attending a picnic organised by the Masonic Lodge in Sydney, there was an assassination attempt on Prince Alfred by a sympathiser with the Irish independence cause. The Grand Master William Vile intervened, and as a reward, he was given quite a sum of money, as well as a large wine jug. After some debate, he decided to donate the cash to charitable purposes. After some debate, it was decided to build a new hospital, that hospital being the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. Doric, Ionic and then Corinthian columns structured on top, as well as all these other architectural elements. Again, I had lymphoma a few years ago, and I was treated here at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. Got top-notch care, awesome people there, and a big thanks to them. Wonderful people, wonderful hospital, but very esoteric, very Masonic. Throughout the building, there are multiple references to it, and also connections to the Oddfellows, who had a strong impact on developing the health industry, regulating health, chemists, and so forth, and actually still carried to this day. For instance, the national pharmacy chain in South Australia begun, but still owned and operated by the South Australian Oddfellows. The Doric, Ionic and Corinthian have many meanings, and there's if you read up on the open history regarding these columns, especially the Roman architect Vitruvius talks about the Greek origins of how they started. Also, he'll talk about their greater meanings, for instance, to male, female, and virgin or maiden, as well as the proportions and the measurements of it to an extent, but the three orders then become the five orders. The Romans added two orders. The Tuscan column and the composite column were added by the Romans. More than weights as well, on the music scales, Ionian and Dorian, is Ionic and Doric. And the proportions of their measurements also connect to some interesting musical connections, but music's not really my thing, so I won't go too deeply into that. But on this board we can see how the five orders also connects to the five senses. Again, Vitruvius would be one of the people to look into, but Palladio in the early Renaissance period, he was one of those who reintroduced these orders of architecture into the Europe and the modern world, and that's one of the reasons why you'll see it in so many important public buildings, especially those built during the revival period. So just to recap, so we have the three Greek orders: man, woman and maiden, strength, wisdom and beauty, also connection to the senses. Okay, yeah, the Ionic column, but okay, I'll leave that for the moment. Now back to the Parthenon, which I mentioned earlier, and has 48 feet high columns. For instance, the state capital in Missouri has 48 feet columns, as well as a Hermes statue. But the Parthenon is a perfect... they've chosen 48 feet because it's a harmony point between different sets of measures, and interestingly it connects to some geometry. For instance, on the Doric scale, 135 hand, 135 degrees, describes an octagon, as where on the pentagon, 540 Doric inches, the sum of the angles in a pentagon being 540. That might just be a beautiful coincidence, but I don't believe so. There's some argument as to the exact origin of a 360 degree compass, and most sources will only put it back to roughly 1,000 years ago. I think that there's some very strong arguments to say that not only is the common foot at least 2,500 years old, the 360 degree compass also I do believe we'll go back, and because of these beautiful harmonies between the numbers, I think that needs to be taken more seriously. And again, music and measurement and weights and measures, it just all blends in with such perfection that it cannot be dismissed as pure coincidence. That's really a fool's cry to just dismiss it. But the Colosseum, Freemasonic connections, the origins of who were the original Masons going back to the ancient world, mathematical proportions, as well as the key numbers that we still use today, such as 528, the use of 180 feet, the use of 272 feet, for instance, Montmartre Cathedral, the Basilica de Sacré-Cœur in France, has the same numbers and proportions in there as well. The square root of 3, it's really all there, and the thing is that once you identify one key element in a building, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 after that. You just need to follow it through, and you'll find that it's not just one level, it's not just 2, it'll be 3 or 4 or even more levels, and it's about having an open mind. The traces have been left, it's clear, it's measurable, it's observable, it will be repeated over and over again from the ancient world through to the modern world. And since the Greeks and Romans, who were 2,000 years after the Old Kingdom Egyptian, and they're 2,000 years away from us, it's not unreasonable to show the connection and follow it through and see how the very ancient stone masons through to the Greeks and the Romans, and then through until today. It's all here, it's all there to be seen. So in the beginning of the video I mentioned the treasury of Atreus, 33 layers of masonry and 48 feet wide. I also talked about Ionic, Doric and Corinthian, and how the Parthenon in Greece is a conversion point where the common scale, which we consider modern but is actually anything but modern, it's at least 2,500 years old, Parthenon 48 feet high, a work of masonry. Another iconic from Paris, the Arc de Triomphe, the central vault is 48 feet wide. Again, it's masonry and clearly connected to Freemasons. So we have these three structures, but 48 feet, and we're just going to go onto the Pythagorean harmonic numbers, and you see how 48 feet also breaks down into, for instance, 8 fathoms, 16 yards, 32 cubits, 64 span, or 48 feet is 192 palm, 144 hand, or 756 inches. But I talked about 528 and its importance in regards to weights and measures, 32 being the 528 being the 32nd triangular number, 32 points around the 33rd point for the old system of portolan mapping. Also, we take it a little bit further and we move across and we see how it connects to tuning, 192 palm. Each of these would therefore be 192 hertz, being G. And yeah, this system is the measures are old, the temples are old. It's based around even in ancient legends such as New Jerusalem and the Ark of Utnapishtim, who described the Great Flood in Sumeria from the Epic of Gilgamesh. 480 grains in a troy ounce. Troy ounce is when we talk about silver and gold. They're measured by the troy ounce, not the standard ounce where we use for foodstuffs. 144 sun, moon and time, the Vesica Pisces. Beautiful numbers in maths, beautiful numbers in geometry, again platonic solids, and all these things all merge together. And you might some might try and explain it away and say, well, it sort of begun by accident, and then over time it just, all these symphony of coincidence just come together, and then a couple of people got together and planned it and said, oh, let's do this, let's make the compass 360 degrees. And I believe this is a ridiculous argument to make, considering that we can know with certainty that the measure systems of the ancient times and the ancient temples were built around this. So just to end off and just to show that it's not just those few buildings that I've cherry-picked, that's the Missouri Capitol building, Jefferson City. The columns are 48 feet high. This is on the south portico. There's a statue of Ceres above, and there are two sculptures flanking the steps on either side. When you see these symbols, when you see these types of columns, you can almost bet the house that these other levels will be included within. And it's hermetic knowledge, and we have the Hermes, clearly actually one of two, but also you'll see the Kundalini or the Caduceus, the horn of plenty or the cornucopia, that's with all the fruit spilling out, and the anchor being a symbol of hope in Christianity related to Noah's Ark, but it also crosses over. You'll see it on Freemasonic tracing boards, and also on the tracing boards you're going to see the Ark as well. So sun and moon, as well as on the columns, are celestial and terrestrial sphere, earth and stars, but also the Ark and the anchor, amongst so many other things. Most of these tracing boards are measuring tools and the work tools of a mason and a craftsman. So you can see and start to find for yourself where you'll, especially in capital buildings, major public buildings, major public parks, as well as churches on a grand scale, but also small churches and the small parks and the small graveyards and the small memorials around them. So through the use of symbols, through the use of measurement, through the use of arithmetic and astronomy and music and geometry, we'll see these carried through from ancient times and through until the modern times. It's very real, it's very important, it's very lovely, and it's something I think that's worth knowing about, worth appreciating, worth investigating. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and have a good one.